10 Days Abraham Lincoln by David Colbert. Introduction. The people who rise to the top aren't always the heroes their biographies make them out to be. Abraham Lincoln, however, has become the gold standard by which other presidents are judged and by which many of them judge themselves. Historians and the general public almost always place him in the top spot when presidents are ranked. Yet during his lifetime, Lincoln was called unpatriotic and even a tyrant. When he was elected to the presidency, members of his own party questioned his ability. During the war, his judgment was questioned. Afterward, a large part of the population hated him. To a large extent, we revere him now because we live in a world he helped to create. We're taught and we believe, as he believed, that Americans should enjoy equal rights and status under the law. We believe that the government of the United States derives its authority from the people and exists to serve them. These may seem like simple and obvious ideas, almost too childish to mention in our modern, complex world. But in Lincoln's lifetime, there were serious doubts that people could govern themselves. Lincoln was born in 1809, less than 30 years after the American Revolution ended, and just 20 years after the Constitution established our present form of government, the presidency, Congress, and the Supreme Court. That early period in the country's history was marked by many disputes among the states and between the states and the federal government. Throughout Lincoln's life, the countries of Europe still expected the American experiment with the democracy to end in chaos. The Civil War was seen by some as the final breakdown. Although Lincoln's simple ideals were ridiculed by his political opponents and by his rivals within his own party, he stuck to them at a time when other politicians became lost in complexity. That's an important reason Lincoln's vision of the country has prevailed. What's far less simple is the route Lincoln took to reach his goals. "I claim not to have controlled events," he said, "but confess plainly that events have controlled me." Though he was being too modest, there's some truth in that statement, even when it comes to his most admired achievement, the end of slavery. If people know nothing else about the Civil War, they know it ended slavery. If they know only one thing about Lincoln, it's that he freed the slaves. But those one-line versions of history focus on the final results of a process that took place over many years and could have moved in many different directions. Lincoln, like the country, moved step by small step toward the end of slavery. Had the South not split from the United States and attacked it, Lincoln might not have used his presidential power to abolish slavery. Although he very much wanted slavery to end, he also believed the Constitution and other laws protected it where it already existed. Even during the Civil War, there were slave states in the Union: Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, and West Virginia. Lincoln offered to pay the slave owners of those states if they would free their slaves, and worked hard to get them to agree, but when they refused, he didn't impose his will on them. He believed, probably correctly, they'd try to join the Confederacy if he forced his wishes on them. Even his famous Emancipation Proclamation didn't free those Union slaves. It had effect only in the Confederate territory then under control of the U.S. Army. In what now may seem like an unusual twist of history, but at the time was a tragedy, slavery existed in the Union states of the North until several months after the Civil War had freed the slaves of the South. The complicated path to some simple ideas is what this book is about. It doesn't contain many of the fun stories that have become standard for biographies of Lincoln. He was a great wrestler. He could really swing an axe. And he grew a beard because a young girl asked him to do it. It's about the larger questions facing the country during his lifetime and the answers Lincoln offered. In the 10 days of his 20,517, described in the chapters that follow, the 10 that most changed his life and yours, the changing fortunes of two rival armies may mean less than the change that took place in the minds of most Americans.